Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the first panel in our series, Exploring the Future of Energy. My name is Julie Wagner, and I'm the Interim Director of the Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility at the Leeds School of Business. Our center is focused on connecting the Leeds School with the sustainable business community. Before we get into the conversation, I wanted to note that we are located on the traditional territories of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples. In addition, 48 contemporary tribal nations are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. I'd like to thank our collaborators from NREL and Schneider Electric, Ellen Morris, Matt Futch, and Amy Haddon, who helped us to create and organize this panel series, and my colleague Justine Roberts for her hard work behind the scenes. I'm deeply grateful to our panelists and our moderator for sharing their time and expertise with us today. If you have questions during the session, and I hope that you will, please put them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on it, and I'll pass any questions that you post along to our moderator, Heidi Van Genderen. Heidi has worked in the nonprofit, public, and academic sectors on advancement of a low-carbon economy for several decades. She became the first Chief Sustainability Officer at the University of Colorado Boulder a little over 3 years ago. Prior to service at CU, she has had the privilege of serving as the state of Colorado's first gubernatorially appointed climate advisor and served as a presidential appointee in the Obama administration at the Department of Energy. She's a Colorado local. Heidi, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Julie, and welcome to everyone. I so much appreciate the chance to be part of this today, and I think the work of Caesar and the Leeds School and this particular series and topic could not be more timely. It's safe to say that few of us who are alive today have experienced anything quite like all that we're living through at this moment. We're in the midst of an extraordinary convergence of 4 concurrent crises: a global health pandemic, measured economic calamity, the ongoing climate crisis, and the impetus to address systemic racism and inequality. It truly is an astonishing time of unprecedented challenge, but also of unprecedented opportunity. I'm looking at the smoke out of my home office window right now, and I see tangible evidence of how climate change is exacerbating and amplifying Mother Nature's destructive inclinations. The good news is we know that what we can do to address human contribution to climate change, we know what we can do to address that, and of course, the energy transition is at the heart of that. You're here to hear about that today. Renewable energy, one of my favorite portions of the energy economy, is the key to the solution set that we seek, and we're going to hear from 3 terrific experts on that topic today, who will describe for us how we merely need to transition to more thoroughly draw from that giant nuclear power plant in the sky that we also know as the sun, which is somewhat obliterated at the moment. Today, we are fortunate to have 3 outstanding panelists who are working hard at expanding the renewables portfolio in our energy economy. And they do so from 3 distinct and important sectors within their post, from government, the private sector, and the utility industry. Before I take the privilege of introducing those panelists, just a couple of logistical details for how this webinar will run today. I will introduce you to the panelists, and they will then give brief presentations, overviews from their perspectives. We'll follow that with questions and answers and discussions, and hope that you as audience members will feel free to participate, as Julie invited you to do so, by placing questions and/or discussion points into that chat box at any time during the panelists' presentations. If your question is directed to a specific panelist, please note that as well in the chat box. Without further ado then, it's my pleasure to introduce all 3 distinguished panelists. Peter Green is the Deputy Director for Science and Technology and the Chief Research Officer at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, at one of our crown jewels. Sorry, how many times have I said NREL and I managed to muff that? After earning his PhD from Cornell University, he spent 11 years at Sandia National Laboratories and subsequently 20 years in academia as engineering faculty at the University of Texas, Austin, and the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He is the former president of the Materials Research Society. John Powers leads the global renewable energy consulting practice at Schneider Electric, an extremely important and well-known company in the energy space. His division works as an independent advisor with commercial, industrial, and institutional clients to help them transition to renewable energy around the world through on-site solutions, off-site power purchase agreements, and renewable energy certificates. Schneider's clients have been able to build out of over 8 gigawatts of new wind and solar in the past 5 years alone in the United States, Europe, India, Australia, and Latin America. Last but not least, Holly Velasquez-Horvath has worked at Xcel Energy for the last 9 years, concentrating her efforts on leading teams to evolve and advance local, state, federal policy and stakeholder engagement. She currently is the Senior Director of State Affairs and Community Relations here in Colorado. Her team is responsible for the local and state government relations, local economic development, and social investments right here in our backyard. My pleasure to turn the dais over to Peter Green.
So good afternoon, everyone. For the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about the energy transition. It's a transition from a primarily fossil fuel-based economy to one that's going to have the effect of decarbonizing the environment, namely an energy system that's going to be largely renewable energy based. And in fact, what I'd like to do by the end of my presentation is to give you a sense of what are some of the scientific and technological considerations as we go forth. Now, by way of context, we think during the next 20 years or so, as we look around the globe, we anticipate that a population increase of approximately 20% by the best estimates. And why this is important is that our energy use will continue to increase. And in the absence of really aggressive measures, our primary energy consumption could grow as much as 40%. So if you look at the graph in the bottom left here, it represents energy consumption predicted for the next 20 years or so based on a series of scenarios. The point I'd like to get from this is the following. If there are no new policies, we're going to continue increasing our energy use, which is going to be problematic. On the other hand, if you have ambitious climate policies, then we may end up using a lot less energy for the same sort of output. But these different scenarios are based on a range of assumptions, and so we need to be clear about a few things. One is that some of them may be too expensive, and one of the things we know nowadays is that if the sacrifice is too high, people may not be willing to make it. Companies won't do this. And two, it makes assumptions about technology developments. And so there's a bit of a question across the board. However, what is clear on the other hand is that with the growing population and the increasing energy use, the CO2 emissions are going to continue to increase. And so they're going to be active measures. The active measures are going to have to be things that are economical and continue to promote economic growth. So it's worth considering. We look, at some key trends around the globe, which I think you find very interesting. First event, for example, is adoption of electric vehicles. 2019, there were 7.2 million EVs adopted around the world. The point I'm making here is that as the price of EVs become comparable or even cheaper than internal combustion vehicles, they're going to become ubiquitous. And the graph at the top left is just giving you estimates from various organizations about the percentage of new vehicles that are going to be EV based. And that's a key thing to bear in mind. The other trend to think about is the number of connected devices, smart appliances, EVs, sensors, a range of things that even people have around. And since 2015, there are about 15.4 billion connected devices, and 10 years later, 2025, we expect to see 25 billion of them. If you look at data centers that enable us to do scientific computing or video streaming or social media for that matter, since 2015, the amount of tasks have increased 400%. And as we engage in more using machine learning and artificial intelligence or solving all kinds of problems, that use is going to go up. My point here is that if you look at these trends, and a number of them exist, then we have to think largely about the future, electrification, and even more importantly, since these things use a lot of energy, data centers use a lot of energy, we're gonna have to think about how do you integrate and manage energy resources. And so these are some of the other questions that are coming up that have to be addressed in addition to the expansion, increase in use of primary fuels. Now, as we look, this graph that I'm looking at here provides sort of predictions or expectations based on different scenarios. And what we see, the big message is that in the years to come, the energy system is going to use a lot more renewables, a lot more wind and solar. So another way of thinking about this, right now we're producing gigawatts of power from wind and solar. We're going to have to go to perhaps tens of terawatts. And so that's where we have to be. The good news here, though, is that renewables, the cost of renewables have now actually in some places comparable to, or in fact cheaper than the fossil sources. So that's actually a really good start. And if you look in terms of adoption of new energy, it's mostly from renewables. So as we ask the question then, what do we do to meet decarbonization goals? In other words, reduce the CO2 emissions. At the same time, decrease the energy intensity or improve efficiencies by and large. It really gets back to what does this new future energy system look like? So by way of context, the current system was one built by Edison, really was built to generate power from larger fossil sources. The future system now, we begin to get a sense of what it would be. It's no longer just a central power plant that generates power and distributes. We now have solar arrays. Some of us have rooftop solar, the wind farms, the whole range of things that are coming out. Now, one thing to bear in mind, as you increase the amount of solar and wind, you've now increased the connection, you increase the amount of power electronics or devices that sort of take the power from wind and solar to the grid. That's very different than the traditional synchronous generation from coal and natural gas, for example. That's the thing to bear in mind. The other thing that we're going to see is that there's a lot more communication and controls and data. These green circles, those are all sensors. And so you're thinking about a smart grid system that's going to be able to look very carefully and evaluate and manage and control all kinds of devices. So these, and as I mentioned, in the EVs, there's storage, there's flexible loads, there are all kinds of things here. And so the basic idea then is that take a typical city, so 1 million people. And let's say people have a series of devices that are connected to the internet, by and large. And they may be an EV, maybe a smart appliance, things like that. Each city is going to have millions and millions of devices. And so you have to think about the power system of the future that's going to control this and be able to optimize the energy that's being used. And this kind of energy system of the future is an autonomous energy system. And it's something at NREL for the past 4 years, I've spent millions of dollars working with collaborators across the world to develop the foundations of how this is going to work. And a lot of this is happening right now. So this is my last slide. The big message here is that electrification is going to be a big thing. Transportation is going to be the largest contributor. And in fact, by 2040, something in the order of maybe 40% of primary energy use will be due to electrification. The goal is to make sure that electrification is produced by renewables and not by the old fossil sources. The buildings and communities of the future are going to be grid interactive, and energy management is going to be centrally. They're going to be able to they're going to provide grid services, providing grid stability. That's what the buildings of the future look like. Storage, energy storage. They're going to be next generation batteries beyond lithium-ion batteries that are going to be more stable long-term instead of dealing with some of the safety issues right now. Seasonal storage, namely you're going to store energy, chemical bonds, things like hydrogen. We keep thinking about hydrogen economy. Today, hydrogen is used to power forklifts and data centers in some places. There's going to be a future energy system that's going to work hard at providing cheap renewable electricity to work in the chemical or biochemical conversion of CO2 to chemicals of fuels and materials. And last point is that since, for example, the amount of wind is going to have to power contributions is going to go up by an order of magnitude, you're going to be providing a lot more wind machines, a lot more wind turbines. They're going to be bigger and they're going to be larger. You can't throw the blades in the wind in sort of landfills anymore. And so the new direction is to produce wind blades for these new wind machines that are simply recyclable. And that's going on right now. And so this whole circular economy where basically you reuse or you want to minimize the amount of anything that goes into the landfill and instead find ways to reuse them or recycle or upcycle them. And so this is sort of what the big picture looks like here. And I think with this, let me thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Peter. And over to John Powers.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Heidi. And Peter, thanks for that overall overview. It's always inspiring and exciting to see the big picture and the broad start to finish, where are we heading in the grand scheme of things when it comes to renewables and the power grid and our energy transition. I'm going to talk a little bit about, from a company standpoint, from a corporate and industrial energy user standpoint, what's kind of happening right now. So taking maybe a step back from the big picture and saying, how are we seeing this transition occur in the world today? And how is that being led by some of the corporate world, in addition to obviously support by governments around the world? So just a quick background on Schneider Electric, the company that I work for, one of the biggest companies in the world folks may never have heard of. It's a French company that sounds German. And we don't make elevators or the little moving sidewalks. It's what we actually do is provide the infrastructure for energy, all of the things that Peter was talking about, connected devices. So we don't produce electricity and we don't make motors that use it, but everything in between Schneider makes. So, that's switches and data center infrastructure and microgrids and all of the pieces that connect all of these energy systems together is kind of, Schneider's a world leader in those things. It's 160,000 some employees. So large global company out of France. The little part that I sit within is the consulting side of Schneider Electric. So what my group does is helps work with large corporate and industrial energy users to help them transition from the traditional ways of using electricity to renewable energy. So I'm focused every day, all the time, on how do we get more renewable energy put on the grid in grids around the world. Put up a couple of stats here on Schneider. One of the reasons I'm really proud to work for Schneider is we're one of the most sustainable, forward-thinking companies for our own operations as well as what my group does, which is help other companies get their operations to a more renewable future. So you can advance the slide, if you don't mind. So where we plug in is helping companies. There's companies around the world that are saying, well, my government might have a 20% renewable energy ambition, but I have 100% renewable energy ambition, right? Like, I'm not going to wait for policy. I'm going to go ahead of policy. And, this is these trends in global warming and in carbon change, climate change are happening faster than policy is getting there. So for my corporation, I'm going to go to 100% renewable. I'm going to go to carbon neutral. I'm going to go to carbon negative. I'm going to look into my supply chain. And so they come to us and say, well, how can we do that? How can you guys help us? And that's what our team does. The good news is, as Peter was mentioning, it's not you're going to have to spend a bunch more money type of conversation anymore. So it's really, renewables are becoming less expensive in markets all around the world. And the general arc of energy is bending towards renewables, and it's happening all over the place. The outcome of that is we're seeing large corporations and in a growing sense aggregations of smaller corporations. So we actually just announced with Walmart last week, I guess last Thursday, a little less than a week ago, that we're engaging with them to reach out to all of their suppliers, some big, some small, and aggregate so that those suppliers can support renewable energy. So, but large and small corporations are saying, we want to adopt renewable energy and we want to put more clean energy on the grid. And so this is just you can see the trend around the world with corporate adoption of renewable energy, which is not quite to the scale of utility adoption that Holly will talk about in a minute, which is great to see. but is a real player. You know, the corporate energy user is a real player in the power markets these days. And what we've actually seen is that the commitments are even outpacing the adoption. So while it's been really exciting and gratifying to see a lot of big corporations making renewable commitments, you know, signing a long-term agreement for new renewable energy that allows that project to get built, this is the RA100, which is a non-government organization that's encouraging companies to sign up to say, we're going to be 100% renewable energy. Just those companies who have signed up, I think it's maybe over 200 or 300 now. When you look, you know, Bloomberg has done this study where when you look at the amount of power that they're going to need to purchase from renewables to get to their 100% target, and that's to say nothing of all the other companies who would come on top, there's a significant demand that's been created for renewable energy globally by these leading companies. And it's just going to continue to grow. So I think the white bars there are what still needs to be purchased, still needs to be built in order to meet that corporate demand. So it's exciting to see corporates driving this change as one of the pieces, you know, along with all the others. And then for the last slide, just wanted to talk for a minute about what is the carbon impact of switching to renewable energy. So, you know, our organization has worked with, you know, our clients have allowed over 8,000 megawatts now of new renewable energy to be added to the power grid, and you can see what some of the impact is. I mean, in today's society right now, one of the biggest things we can do is transition as fast as possible from fossil fuel, coal, gas to 100% renewable energy. There's going to be a lot of research that needs to be done and a lot of work with NREL to make that seamless and make that happen. But there's a long way to go. I mean, globally, we're still a small percentage, as you saw on Peter's slide earlier. So, you know, each new wind farm that gets built instead of a new coal plant or gas plant, each coal plant that gets retired is making a huge impact. So yeah, very excited and happy to be a part of that. So where Peter's thinking big about where we need to go and what we need to do, you know, our group at Schneider's sort of boots on the ground trying to get the work done as fast as we can. So yeah, thanks a lot for the time. Happy to take questions, and I think we're over to Holly next.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Julie and Heidi, for having us join you today. TU, as you guys know, is one of our major customers and partners here at Xcel Energy, and we always enjoy the opportunity for you to offer us to engage with students to learn more about the company and also what we are doing to lead the clean energy transition. Just really quickly, Xcel, just to give you a quick background, Xcel Energy operates in 8 states across the Midwest and west of the United States. I always think of our operating company footprint like a T. So we serve Minnesota, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, New Mexico, Texas, and then of course here in Colorado. In Colorado, we serve close to 2 million customers, and those are large businesses, small businesses, residents. Over half of these customers are served both by electric and gas, and the other half are served either by electric or gas, and it's about, you know, a 60-40 split in service to those customers here in Colorado. Within my department, State Affairs and Community Relations, my customer focus are our cities and our counties that we serve, our state legislators, and other key stakeholders within communities and here in Colorado. Our engagement with our cities, towns, and counties are very much a partnership, and we actively engage and converse with our partners to understand their energy goals and how we as their electric and gas utility company can help them achieve their goals. And what I will say is that at any point as we progress through this transition, the partnership between NREL and Schneider Electric and all other stakeholders that are in this industry right now, it's going to take a village, and it's going to take the innovation and commitment from all of us to achieve what we're trying to over, you know, the next 3 decades or so. So over the last decade, our company has transformed, in my perspective, in how we serve our customers. We have 3 guiding principles that we established a few years ago, and they are leading the clean energy transition, improving the customer experience or enhancing the customer experience, and keeping bills low. When we think about our work, whether it's state policy, building an energy partnership with our community, serving our large customers and helping to meet their energy goals, or filing a new program or offering at the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, these guiding principles are always a foundation when we work with our stakeholders and advance our business. What I think is the most remarkable in reflecting where we were in 2010 and where we are today in advancing, leading the clean energy transition, a lot of it has come down to the work that we have had with our state policymakers, our federal policymakers, and our communities. And in addition to that, our customers are asking for it. They believe this is an important piece to all of what they do, whether it's a business or a resident. They feel it is, part of their commitment in participating in, climate change. And so that is something that I think for the first time in a long time, at least from Excel's perspective, that we have started to listen, talk, engage with our customers and figure out how to provide energy solutions that meet their goals and their wants, so that we can continue to provide them electric and gas service, for the long term. So there have been, I think, when I think about the transition over the last 10 years from a company perspective and what we have done and what we are trying to accomplish for the next, 10, 20, and 30 years, there are actually 3 significant, moments that, and policy moments, I would say, and, filings that we have done that have actually really made that transition possible. And back in 2010, Clean Air, Clean Jobs is a piece of legislation that was passed here in Colorado. And this law enables utilities like Xcel Energy to transition from coal to other energy sources. These other energy sources include wind, solar, and natural gas, at least at this point. What this legislation has done is help advance at a utility scale renewable energy and make transformational impact on meeting a carbon-free future. And then in roughly around 2017, what we were able to do because of the Clean Air, Clean Jobs Act is file a very aggressive electric resource plan that allowed for us to put in place different types of renewable energy, some battery storage, a little bit of natural gas, for us to achieve 55% renewable energy by 2026. So from 17, 18, through the end of 18, we had worked really hard with state legislators, local communities, customers, in filing and getting approval from the Colorado Public Utility, from the Colorado, the Public Utilities Commission, for us to achieve that 55% renewable energy by 2026. And just to go back to Peter's point in one of his presentations, much of the success of that Colorado Energy Plan was because of the cost, the economics that we were able to identify by different bids that came in that showed wind and solar being cheaper than any other energy source at that time. And so it is absolutely true, and we see it, when we are placing it on our system, that the economics of renewable energy is cheaper, and we have had the ability to integrate that into our system to accomplish both the carbon-free emission reduction and also integrating more renewable energy on the system. And then just about a year ago, or maybe a little over a year ago, we announced one more aggressive goal where we are working to achieve 80% carbon-free electricity by 2030 and 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050. And we believe with the plans that we have in place, both with the Colorado Energy Plan and our next electric resource plan that we will be filing next year, that we will accomplish the 80% carbon-free by 2030. But the trick of how to achieve 100% carbon-free by 2050, we actually haven't figured out yet. But we believed that it was important to put a stake in the ground and tell our customers and other, future entrepreneurs or scientists that we are going to depend on the technology and innovation to help us get to that 100% carbon-free vision by 2050. And I will just end really quickly with, we have been serving Colorado for a little over 150 years. We celebrated our 150-year anniversary last November. And 150 years ago, we were named a different company, but at that time, we were taking a horse and a buggy down a street and lighting gas lamps in downtown Denver. So to just imagine where we were then to what we have accomplished and achieved and where we are today, and also what we are wanting to achieve going into the future, I do believe that the transition is possible. I think anything is possible in this space, but it's going to take a commitment from so many people, not just the utility company, for us to get there. The other piece that I think is really important to highlight is that from an employee standpoint, Xcel Energy is a great company. And I always like to highlight the values that we all wake up every day and work towards, and that's making sure that we operate a safe and reliable system, that we are committed to our customers and enhancing their experience, that we also stay connected and continue to have conversation, both internally and also externally with our customers, and that we hold a high standard of trust. And, and be transparent and talk about some of the challenges, be honest, but also be a good listener and try to think about how we continue to be innovative. So thank you. And I think I'm turning it back to Heidi for questions.
Indeed. Thank you all. Those were 3 informative and terrific presentations. I'm going to invite the attendees to continue to place questions and discussion points into the chat box. We're getting a few. I'll take the moderator's prerogative by starting off the Q&A. It's so interesting for those of us who've been working as long as we have on the energy transition to consider the possibility and the plausibility of a 100% renewable economy. You've heard all 3 of you have addressed the concept, and my question is about the plausibility and the reality of that. And Holly, I'd ask you to begin. I'd like all 3 of you to respond to the question of whether a 100% renewable energy economy is truly possible and plausible. But I'd ask Holly specifically by considering the following slightly more specific question, and that is, how do communities add new renewables on the scale necessary to achieve a 100% renewable electricity system if that community's goals are more aggressive than Xcel's goals or state legislation that's in place? It was also just a quick one, intrigued that you started with the Clean Jobs Act and not the first initiated renewable energy standard.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I know we've had a lot, but those are key moments for me.
That's fair enough.
So it's a really great question. Thanks for asking it, Heidi. I would say, in my presentation, you can see that by 2030, 80% carbon free doesn't mean 80% renewable energy. And there's a balance that we have and that we are responsible for as a utility company to ensure that we maintain reliability as everybody expects to have their lights on and their homes warm, and it cannot be out, right? And if we do have a storm or we do have an outage of some sort, you know, it is absolutely expected that we are immediately responsive and we make sure that, you know, everybody continues to have their power. And right now, when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, I think that it poses some challenges with how do we continue to keep, you know, all of our customers' lights on and their power requirements, but also have renewable energy. So carbon free, at least right now, is what we believe is the best path forward. But I will also say that I don't think even 20 years ago, we would have imagined what we have today and the advancements that we have made, both economically and with technology, on where, you know, where we are at least today. So I would never put anything off the table with, you know, is it possible to be 100% renewable? I think that the balance is really important when you're trying to think about making sure that it's reliable, making sure that it's cost effective and that people can still afford to pay their utility bill. And then in addition to that, how much of that integration of renewable energy comes on the system. Battery storage, I believe, is an important piece to that puzzle. But, you know, we have the opportunity right now in the Colorado Energy Plan that we have integrated batteries, utility scale battery storage on 2 of our solar farms right now. It enables us to start studying and understanding what that battery storage looks like from a utility scale perspective. But even then, there's still questions about what that battery storage and how that integrates back into our grid and services our customers. And what we're seeing is about a 4-hour, you know, lifespan of that. And so when you think about when we come home, right, when you're at a peak of a time for our customers, you're coming home at 5 o'clock at night, you're doing all of the things that you have, and then everybody's going, you know, shutting kind of down around 9 o'clock at night. We aren't sustainable with at least the existing technology that we have to back up all of that, those power, you know, wants and needs from our customers with batteries. But I would also say that technology, you know, and innovation will drive how we accomplish those goals.
Gentlemen, turn that question over to each of you from your perspectives.
So I guess I'll take it. I think Holly characterized the problem quite well. You essentially have a grid that's going to have to balance the supply, the generation, with the load or the needs of customers, and it's going to have to happen every second, every minute, every hour of the day, and it's going to have to happen seasonally, which is what we do right now. Now, to get to 100% renewables, it means that you have a grid that operates by these large synchronous generators from fossil fuels to one that's entirely 100% renewables, where it's connected to the grid by some kind of a power electronics device, an inverter, for the technical people here. We don't know, and we've never done the experiment before to understand how these inverters are going to operate in such a way to do that. The second point is that you have the diurnal mismatch. The sun is way up in the middle of the day. In the evening, it goes down when people are coming home and need supply. Oftentimes, there's a lot of wind at night where you don't need that much wind by and large. And so potentially, there's an opportunity for perhaps using batteries. Now, up to about 20–30% utilities can handle, no problem. It's what happens then trying to decide how to forecast things well, and how to simply adopt some of these technologies at scale, which we've never done before. That's gonna have to happen. And then as you go from winter to fall, the needs for power are very, very different. Maybe you have some major sort of weather-based issues where there isn't enough solar installed, for example. And so the question then gets back to, how do you address these problems all the time? To get to 80–90% is a challenge. We don't know how to do that. We haven't adopted things at scale to be able to get that right. Of course, there could be some base load. It could be nuclear. In a few years, the geothermal is actually going to be providing a lot more power. That's going to make a really, really big difference if a large base load. You can have to think about storage, not just in terms of batteries, because batteries last 4 to 6 hours. You can have to think about seasonal storage to get around the seasonal mismatch of things. And seasonal storage means you're gonna have to figure out how to store all the electrons in the bonds, maybe hydrogen and a range of things like that. And so in principle, the answer is yes. Technically, we don't know how to do this. There's no study that says you can't do this. And many studies that say you can't, but they haven't looked at it in sufficient detail. So, so I think Holly is right. I'm pretty sure a few years from now, it's gonna get addressed. But right now, it's not just a science. It's also the economics we can deal with the science. It's all the policies. Do we get the policies right? Do we get the kind of cooperation from the various utilities across the place? So that's sort of my sort of long-winded answer for this, but it's a multifaceted problem.
Yeah, I think Holly and Peter, you have both answered it really well. I have faith in Peter and NREL and in all of the students on the the webinar that we're going to figure that out. You know, I think there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done. There's a lot of wood to be chopped to get from where we are right now up to 20 or 30% or 80% or any of the, you know, we got a long way to go between now and then. Let's hope it happens really fast. And then we're facing how do we get that last 20% over the hump really soon? You know, that would be great. That would be great. But I think there's continuous innovation, and maybe it's a combination of batteries, maybe it's hydrogen. It's something that, you know, no one's invented yet. A lot of it is policy, as you say, Peter. A lot of it is how do you make it economical? Because the technology all exists to do it today. It's just too expensive. So, you know, maybe folks can come up with, you know, with innovative ways to get there. I think the critical thing is let's not let it slow us down from going as fast as we can. There's, you know, countries all over the world that are a very small percentage renewables. You know, our own country here in the US, we started out, when I started in 2003 in this job, we were less than 2% wind and solar. I think, Peter, you probably know this number better than I or Heidi, but I think it's over 7% now. But I mean, 7% is really low. You know, how about 27? How about 47? So, yeah. You know, that long way to go. But yeah, have faith that a lot of the people listening to this call are going to get us there.
I'm with you. I'm going to honor the first questioner, Peter, with a question for you from Noah Kobayashi, who says, you mentioned that data centers and data processing has increased 400% since 2015. Microsoft just announced some surprising results from its underwater data center, experiment in Scotland, and it appears to be pretty reliable, efficient, and sustainable. Do you think this principle, submerging components into water to save space and energy for cooling, can or will have broader applications? If so, can you think of any applications that may benefit from this study? Oh,
I think I'll answer part of that question by stating the following. Data centers use approximately 1% of the total energy consumption, and that number has been relatively constant for almost 10 years. So they've been incredibly efficient over time. And so I think this Microsoft advance is gonna even help us do a much better job of that. There's also using fuel cell, hydrogen-powered fuel cells again for power for these data centers. So there's lots of innovation out there. With regards to that particular accomplishment of Microsoft in terms of sort of submerged technologies, in terms of energy, I can't think of anything. I can't think of any new applications. Wind, of course, is offshore, and there's a lot of advances there as well, and that's making a really big difference. Because the wind resource is much better. You can build much bigger wind machines to get a lot more power from them. So that's yeah. But this last part of the question, I can't think of offhand right now.
So to John's point, we're throwing that back to you, Noah, for the additional applications. John, a question for you from sorry, I'm not seeing who that. When it comes to the corporate PPA, power purchase agreement transaction, how do you imagine that process evolving in the road ahead? Are there innovations in the marketplace that could increase the efficiency of corporate PPA procurement?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly right up my alley. So yeah, I think there's continuously innovations in the market to help corporates meet the goals that they're trying to meet. For some companies, they're big energy users and they look at the long-term renewable energy contract as a hedge against their, potential prices going up in electricity. And so, the system we have now is a pretty good way to do that. But for other companies, they're really trying to hit their environmental goal. They're trying to get a new wind farm built, a new solar farm built, but they don't really want exposure to fluctuating power prices. And so, we've seen a lot of innovations in the market with, wind and solar developers being willing to share certain risks with corporate and industrial off-takers. Over time, I think we're seeing more innovation in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, aggregation with smaller buyers coming together. You can also look at it the other way with, a renewable energy buyer that wants to support renewables instead of just one project, supporting little pieces of many projects to diversify risk a bit. But, I think the primary drivers that we're seeing are, the corporate wants to do the right thing, wants to support the renewable energy transition, and really wants to see what they're doing have an impact. And so, that desire for impact is going to remain. We may see shorter term contracts in the future as well, which would make it easier for more projects, for more buyers to participate. But then you're sort of trading that off with the long-term commitment that project needs to get financed and built. So, I think it's constantly innovating. Even the last 2 or 3 years that, we've seen new markets coming onto the fore, policies changing what's available to corporates. I think one of the big things too is companies like Excel, even in regulated markets, being more willing to open up, the ability for their customers to choose renewable energy. And so we've seen that in, utility renewable energy programs for corporate and residential customers all over the world. So, yeah, lots of new innovations to come, lots more to go. It's certainly not the most easy or straightforward process for a company to sign a long-term renewable energy agreement. And so, yeah, we're working very hard to try to streamline that, make that easier, and I know lots of others are as well.
Thanks for that. Customer choice, and of course the question of regulation versus regulated versus deregulated utilities is a whole different topic. But if I may, John, I'll continue with expanding Ann Hamilton's question to actually all of the panelists. She asks, what actions have you seen your customers take to reduce energy consumption in an attempt to mitigate the gap in energy demand versus energy provided by renewables that you presented? Does Schneider work on helping them reduce consumption? And I would ask all of you to address the role of energy efficiency, specific to Ann's question, but more broadly, where does energy efficiency play in the 21st century energy economy?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick since I just spoke. But yeah, Schneider definitely is heavily involved in that. The cleanest energy is the energy you don't use in the first place. We can get more efficient. That's awesome. Schneider does performance contracting with universities, with governments, with all sorts of folks to come in. Big team of engineers comes in and says, where can you reduce energy? We'll even bring in third-party financing so that you don't have to have a budget to upgrade your chillers or your lighting or all the different things, and can guarantee cost savings and energy savings over time. It's a big part of what Schneider does. Many of the devices that Schneider makes, our parent company makes, are meant to reduce energy consumption. I mean, it's a core tenet of what we do. So yeah, it's absolutely critical. I would say though, it's unlikely you're going to reduce to zero. So the energy you are using, it's important also to transition to renewables and where you can't, offset the carbon that you have to, really get to carbon zero and carbon negative. But yeah, efficiency is a huge part of it.
Holly or Peter, any comments on?
Sure, I can answer really quickly too. It continues to, just like John said, the kilowatt hour that's not used is the best one. And so, our customers, we continue to always talk and work with all of our customers around finding out how to improve their energy efficiency. It's interesting. I actually, just even in recent times, we have seen that from our utility perspective that our customers are even though we've got such tremendous growth with, you know, residential and businesses in our operating companies, our sales have pretty much stayed the same for several years. And what that tells you is that, you know, even though we've got the growth going on in our service territory, our customers are using less. And so that, you know, is a good indicator, I think, that, you know, our customers believe that using less energy is the best. It obviously saves them money on their utility bill. But I do also think that, you know, at some point in, you know, the next decade, there's got to continue to be a conversation around what does energy efficiency actually mean. I think that we continue as a utility company to, you know, promote and advance energy efficiency programs to our customers that we've had for a really long time. And so as we've transitioned, you know, the energy industry and how customers are using energy, even into the future, how they're going to plug in their vehicle, when they're going to use their energy, time of use, you know, can we incentivize customers to be more thoughtful about how they're plugging their devices in at their home, or businesses are using that energy, so that we shrink the bell curve that we have at peak hours around 6 o'clock at night. I think that, you know, is that an incentive that we need to start thinking about so that we can level off this massive need to, you know, increase all of the generation to meet that need, you know, later in the evening. So I think that there's opportunity to just even reimagine a little bit, what does energy efficiency look like, and how do we continue to, you know, work with our customers on thinking about their energy use overall.
Okay. Yeah, so NREL has about a little over 900 partners globally. And the relationships we have with them are very diverse. They range from working with people to adopt advanced energy technologies to improve efficiency or use a lot less energy. On the other end of the spectrum, we have deals with Exxon and Equinor. Equinor built the world's largest offshore wind farm up in Scotland. We work with with companies to in terms of the wind machines, GE, Siemens Gamesa, to improve efficiencies, designing of the next generation wind machines, new science. We work with First Solar and Thin Film Solar, doing very basic science that enable them to improve manufacturing efficiencies. Next generation cells are going to be a lot more efficient. So so it's a fairly broad spectrum of things that we do, and the relationships, as I mentioned, are from some business scientific work to advice to simply joint ventures. Exxon, Shell, Equinor. So we're working with everybody on a range of questions. What do you do carbon capture? How do you convert CO2 to different chemicals and materials? It's a fairly diverse portfolio that we engage in. I gave an example of the autonomous energy systems of the future. We work with partners all over the globe to begin to really develop a lot of software and the algorithms to make that an eventual possibility somewhere down the future. We're working at people on how to optimize the performance of wind farms. And I'm looking about licensing agreements with new software developments.
A lot going on, and of course the distinction again between efficiency within the industrial process versus efficiency in the Amory Lovin's famous megawatt notion of the energy you don't use is the least carbon intensive of all is an important distinction as well. But question from Neil Anderson, which is a good one, I think. Where is the energy going to come from to power hundreds of millions of electric vehicles? And certainly as we consider this notion of beneficial electrification, we also have this concurrent aim to reduce our greenhouse gas emission profile. And if those vehicles are not being powered by low carbon electricity sources, it's we're not making the gains we need to do. So thank you for addressing that.
Yeah, it's gonna come from just generating a lot more power from wind and solar and geothermal and nuclear and all those sources that are low carbon sources. That's where it's gonna come from, and that's where the work's gonna go on. For wind, for example, we're gonna be building larger and larger wind machines because they generate a lot more power, and they're gonna be lots more of them offshore. Solar, they're gonna be many more solar modules, different solar technologies in the coming down the future. So yeah, simple answers. We're just gonna have to generate a lot more of it, and we know exactly what to do. We just want to make sure that our government invests in it and the policies are correct.
Holly, do you want to address that? Because I know Excel has come forward with a specific beneficial electrification plan. And it is an interesting chicken and egg. You know, your point, Peter's well taken, but it's like, well, which comes first? You know, how many EVs are being plugged into coal and natural gas before you get to the flip side?
Yes, so absolutely. We believe that, you know, the next 10 years is going to significantly, you know, it's going to show us what that EV adoption looks like. And we actually just recently announced a partnership company-wide that our goal in working with our communities and our state regulators and our customers is to, you know, work to integrate over 1 million EVs onto into, you know, our service territory, not just Colorado, but our service territory overall. And how do we accomplish that? So of course we are absolutely thinking about beneficial electrification. And I think that, you know, for us, it's going back to Peter's point, it's making sure that we are forecasting and understanding what our customers are needing and what are we going to need to add onto our system to continue to generate what the capacity demand looks like. I would also like to add too, Peter was talking about technology, and I just want to give a really interesting example, a real-time example of something that we are, you know, we've been using for the last 10 years or so in partnership with NREL. NREL actually introduced us to this system. It's a wind forecasting system. And we, you know, and it's amazing system that we've got that actually gives us a forecast of when the wind is going to blow. And so we can actually anticipate the megawatts that we can generate from our wind farms, you know, over roughly about a 24-hour period. And so that has actually been a game changer for us because it allows for us to anticipate when we need to bring on those base fuels to make sure that our customers are reliable. In addition to that, I don't know if it's a technology innovation necessarily, but we have a hydro storage pump system up in the Georgetown area. It's a 350 megawatt hydro pump system, and we use it as a battery. And what it does is as soon as we see the wind forecast, and if at any point that wind drops and we didn't forecast it, we have the ability to use that hydro storage pump system to generate that additional 350 megawatts, and no one sees a blip. And what I believe is just, again, that integration of all of those aspects to make sure that we're continuing to be a reliable service provider. We are looking at actually thinking through, can we continue to leverage and build and think about those hydro storage pump systems? Because it has been such a tremendous piece integrating into all of the things that we look at. And it's because of something like the wind forecasting system that we had in partnership with NREL early on. And then in addition to that, leveraging this hydro pump system as a quick backup if we need it.
John,
Yeah, on the EV charging, I mean, you already see studies where even on today's grid, in the US at least, in Europe, you know, maybe there's Australia or Poland is not as good, but where, you know, a mile driven in an EV with today's grid is already cleaner than what you're replacing. So I think you got to remember that what we're starting from is gasoline, and that's not clean. So even going to an EV on today's grid is step change in the right direction. And then it's a lot easier to get the grid to renewables because we know the technology, we have it, we can do it, than it is to get gasoline to be carbon free. So, you know, it's just like with energy, you know, electricity in general. Look, I'll take gas over coal. I'll take nuclear over gas. I'll take wind over nuclear, and I'll take not using the energy over wind. So it's like every little step helps, right?
There you go. I appreciate that. We are unfortunately at time. I've just asked Julie in the chat box. We do have a couple of questions. We do have students any attendees. If the panelists have just a couple more minutes, I would combine 2 questions from the students. For any of you attending who wish to stay on, please do, and those who need to adjourn, please do as well. the questions regarding the careers that you all have had, and myself included, what are you looking for in terms of future employees and their skill sets to have impact and drive change? And combining that with, as a student entering the workforce, what type of roles would you suggest a student get involved in the mission? Where in the job market is there a need, and what skills are needed? So lightning round to each of you.
Okay, maybe I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the skills that are needed are hard work. Science and math is helpful in everything, you know, finance in the business world, being financially literate, being sales literate, and understanding everybody's selling something all the time. I mean, if Peter wants a project to go through at NREL, he's got to convince somebody to do that. So having some of that that skill and that background is really helpful, and just really knowing what you want. So that's the biggest thing when we interview people all the time. If people really want that job, know why, and they're really motivated to do it, that person's just gonna excel. They're gonna overcome obstacles. So I'd say understanding what you want, where you want to get, and really going for it, and expressing that to employers, I think is really valuable.
Holly?
I think John, you know, hit most of them on the head right there. I think what I would add is I am a non-traditional individual that you can imagine coming into Xcel Energy. I've been here for, you know, a little over 9 years. I have a policy, political background, and I think you have to be open to learning. I've spent the last 9 years learning a lot about this industry, and I appreciate it. I love it. I love the complexity of it, and I love solving really challenging and hard problems. And back to John's point, I'm a little bit of a salesperson. I love championing our company. I love championing and working with our customers, especially our communities, around achieving what they want with their goals. And so I think if you're open to learning, if you're, you know, willing to take on and try and solve complex problems, and you're interested in an ever-changing environment, because this industry is changing and it's really fascinating, and wanting to be a part of that, I think, you know, you've got a great career ahead of you. And I don't think that you have to be a, you know, an engineer or a scientist to be able to take part and find your role and your place in participating in it and working in it.
So NREL hires people of all backgrounds, from economics and social work, social sciences, all the way to physics and mathematics. We're looking for people that are with a high level of competency, and people that can really work with others, work effectively with others in teams. And I think the idea of being able to convince people to support a program, this sort of sales mentality, is an essential part no matter where you go. It's an essential component of us. It's a key skill set. So.
The future is bright. Thank you all so much to the excellent panelists. I was going to conclude, and I'm going to turn it over to Julie Wagner instead. Thank you all. It was a terrific session. I sure learned a bunch. Julie.
Thank you so much, everyone, our panelists and our moderator. We've so appreciated your comments. I just wanted to quickly plug the fact that this is a series. There are 2 more events. You can see those and lots of other events from CSER on our website. That's colorado.edu/business/CSER, CESR. And I just want to invite everyone to make sure that you are registered and to vote, and vote early in this election. It's so important. Go to vote.gov and you can find all the information you need. Thanks so much. Go Buffs and have a great week.
Thank you.